Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another video for EVE Echoes, and hoo boy, this is a special one for me. Now, the CONCORD Pass has just ended and another one is due to start tomorrow, September the 9th, and it will carry through until the end of October. Check the patch notes and details for when that is due to end. It's usually 6 weeks long. Now, this time around, what makes this super special for me is that the Nanocores that are going to be available include Nanocores for Faction Frigates, something I have been asking for since the Nanocores were first introduced to the game. Now, it does actually also include Nanocores for faction cruisers and faction battleships as well, but hey, those already had the Will of Steel Nanocores, so I'm not quite as excited about those. I'm lying, I'm still very excited, but the faction frigates are still what are really sort of doing this for me. So this video is going to be us having a look at these Dark Halo Nanocores, and what a badass name that is, Dark Halo Nanocores. Absolutely love it. Anyway, this does mean this is going to be a little bit of a bitty video. There's going to be 15 ships that we're looking at and their nanocores. A lot of them are fairly similar as well, but I did want to be thorough because I know people will complain that theirs wasn't covered otherwise, so please make sure you are making use of the timestamps in the description below so you can skip through to the video section that you are waiting for personally. Anyway, if you enjoy this, please let me know by hitting a like on it, sub to the channel, ding the notification bell, you know the drill by now, and of course come join us on Patreon and Discord and all the rest. Anyway, let's jump right in to having a look at these super awesome Dark Halo Nanocores. We're going to kick off proceedings with the Guristas Pirates, and I'll cover the faction frigate, the faction cruiser, then the faction battleship, and then we'll move on to the next faction and we'll repeat it like that there. So we're going to start off here with the Guristas Pirates worm. It's worth noting as well, these are all tier 3 purple cores, they are not tradable. Don't grab one of these thinking you can sell it on the market or donate it to a friend. They are not tradable. You cannot put them on the market, you can't contract them, you can't put them in corporation hangars, you can't jettison them. You cannot trade these in any way. And unfortunately I don't have the codes for them in Formulation. I am going to have to load into these one by one, which makes this a bit of a bitch for me to record, but hey, there we go. Here it is, the Worm Dark Halo Core. Look at how badass that is, that black and slate grey intersliced with that sort of orange magma glow to it. It just looks evil, it looks badass. You see one of these drifting towards you, you know it is coming to wreck your day. Anyway, let's have a look at its stats. Now, the Dark Halo cores, again, Dark Halo, I just love it. The more I say it, the more I just, oh, it sings to me. Also, a very good band, if you haven't heard of them, a Dark Halo. Anyway, moving onwards, they follow this basic blueprint here of an 18% increase to the weapon system damage of choice, the 22.5% increase to the tank of choice, whether it's shield or armor, and a 21% increase to flight velocity, all of which are actually really nice bonuses. Here on the worm, I don't know which I would actually go for. 18% drone damage is nice, but it only affects the drone damage, not the missile damage, which, you know, it's only increasing part of the drone's DPS output. The shield is very nice, you're making the biggest shield faction frigate even bigger, or you could go for flight velocity to deal with the fact that the drone is the Guristas Worm is the slowest moving of the 5 basic faction frigates. It's also worth noting that you won't get these for Sisters of Eve or for Mordu's Legion, unfortunately. It is just the original 5 pirate factions. These secondary attributes here, though, this is where this thing gets really quite exciting. We have Inertia Modifier, which is a really nice thing to have on the worm, which otherwise can struggle under its cumbersome weight. We've got more drone damage, we've got Afterburner speed increase, drone range, flight velocity, shield, and if we keep re-rolling this, you'll see that basically there's all these really cool stats here. I haven't seen missiles come up here, so it does appear to just be shield, drone damage, inertia modifier, flight velocity, and range. Though we are getting things like drone tracking speed and that on there as well, which is pretty cool, and afterburner speed increase, which is an exclusive afterburner. Now, personally, I think the worm does better with a micro warp drive, so that one seems a little bit off, but hey, that's pretty cool. There's a lot of awesome stats there to look forward to. The Gila, yes, that's how it's pronounced. It's based after the Gila monster lizard from southern USA and sort of Mexico area. Is the Guristas Pirates faction cruiser. Very cool looking nanocore. Again, this just really works, and I like the fact that it changes colour depending on what sort of angle you're looking at it from. Now, of course, we did have the Tungsten Age core available for this before, so how does this differ? Well, again, it's got those same stats we saw before: drone damage, shield, and flight velocity. The secondary bonuses here, again, are all really really, really nice. Now, I've been talking a lot with Frosty, who's been flying a healer a lot recently. He's mentioned this whole thing of, you know, do you really want to go for drone damage because you're only increasing part of your DPS. You know, an 18% increase to drone damage on the healer isn't as much as an 18% to laser damage on the Succubus, for example, because it's just, you know, you're only getting the healer has its damage split. Part of its damage comes from missiles and part of it comes from drones. You're only increasing the drones. So going for things like shield and things like that can be really quite nice here, and you can make this astonishingly tanky. And as I've been flicking through this, again, we're seeing a lot of shield options here. Flight velocity, drone damage, inertia modifier, drone range is an available one, which is quite nice. And here we have warp drive speed increase, and just to make it that little bit faster. So there are all kinds of really crazy options you can get here on the healer. I honestly think this is going to cut ahead quite nicely from the Tungsten Age core. The Tungsten Age core is pretty nice, you know, but it's a blue core compared to a purple one. Obviously that means the purple one is going to have higher stats in general. I mean, you can see the drone damage goes up, the shield goes up, and we have flight velocity again there. It's just a straight up upgrade, and I love it. It just looks amazing, and stats are really cool too. If you're a Rattlesnake pilot, you may already have the Will of Steel core, which again has some pretty nice stats to it. An increase to shield boost, to boost amount, or to drone damage. But now we get that sexy looking Dark Halo nanocore as well, and again, just look at how it makes the ship look. How amazing is that? 18% drone damage, 22.5% shield, or 21% flight velocity. I don't think the flight velocity is really going to be something you're worrying about here. On a Rattlesnake, the drone damage, absolutely, if you want to be using this thing with something like sniper drones. My goodness, the damage that they can kick out with an 18% buff is just insane. But it's that shield there. The fact that the Will of Steel, a core that is named after sort of being tanky and hard to destroy, only gives you a 5.25, whereas the Dark Halo here gives you a 22.5% shield, is just insane. And again, we get some really cool bonuses here. Flight velocity, shield boosts, drone tracking speed, inertia modifier. Again, I don't think inertia is going to be a big one. Warp speed does seem to come up here from time to time as well. Afterburner speed increase, I think that means we might get micro warp drive as well. Yep, there it is there. I think on this one, this is going to be one of those that you're going to be looking at things like drone damage, possibly drone range, drone application could be something if you want to be going for more of a brawling Rattlesnake, but definitely you could really stack those shield bonuses and make the Rattlesnake one of the tankiest, most insane of the faction battleships out there. In fact, I think the Rattlesnake itself is actually one of the tankiest battleships in the entirety of EVE Echo, so that's worth considering that you can make it even worse, or technically even better, I suppose, depending on your stance. You can make it even tankier by using this nanocore and leveling it the hell up, and just, oh, who doesn't want a Rattlesnake that looks like that? I don't even really fly battleships, but I want one just because of how amazing that looks. Moving on to the Serpentis Corporation and everyone's favourite #1 faction frigate, the Daredevil. Let's have a look at the Dark Halo for this. Again, just an incredible looking skin. I don't think I'm ever going to get tired of saying that. I just love how this actually looks on these ships. Some of them it looks better than others, and oh my goodness, you wait until you see later on. But anyway, Daredevil Dark Halo core. Of course, the weapon buff here is going to be railgun damage. Not that it frickin' well needs it, but hey, there we get it. Imagine having snub-nosed railguns on your Daredevil here now with that additional railgun damage. Heck, even if you're going for the standard scram-kiting Daredevil build, that's still a really nice amount of extra damage. The 22.5% additional armor makes it a little bit tankier. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I don't think this is the one I would personally go for, because you should be aiming not really to get hit anyway, which means flight velocity very much feels like it could be one of the options you aim for. Either railgun damage or flight velocity for the main attribute, I think. Now again, we've seen beyond here, looking things like inertia modifier, I think could be a really nice one to help you maintain those orbits. Armor, railgun damage, flight velocity, again we get there. I think there is some nice ones, like we've got warp drive speed increase. I'd look more for afterburner personally. But again, it depends on how you want to go here. Railgun range, there's the one I'm looking for. Railgun range. Having that on to a Daredevil, I think, is going to be even nicer. That is the stat I would be going for, especially with sort of the scram-kiting Daredevil, and the one that uses the webs to keep the enemy at range whilst using rifled railguns. Having additional range there pushes them better into your accuracy and your optimal range and accuracy fall off. You get a bit more range control. I think, personally, I'd be looking... I think the Daredevil goes fast enough as it is. I'd be looking to get the railgun range out of the secondaries and going for railgun damage on the primaries for this one. I think that would just make the Daredevil even more terrifying than it already is. Genuinely, I am actually quite excited here because this definitely pulls it ahead of the Atron 2 Interceptor. There was some worry that an Atron 2 Interceptor fitted with the Serpentis Veteran Core ultimately outperforms the Daredevil. Yes, it's more expensive, but it's bubble immune and it gets all of the extra stuff. Here, the Daredevil definitely takes back that top slot with the Dark Halo core. And who doesn't want a Dark Halo Daredevil? I have to say that the Vigilant and thus the Thorax aren't exactly my favourite looking cruisers. Certainly it's a pretty powerful ship, but it does look a little bit like a shiny space man carrot, for want of a better phrase. But I think even putting the Dark Halo core on does actually come a little bit towards rectifying this. It still looks a little bit too suspicious for my liking, but hey, when it's, you know, dark and molten in this sort of finish, you know, people aren't going to be laughing for too long, I don't think. Of course, we did have the Tungsten Age core as well here, which had railgun damage, armor, and flight velocity, same as we have the Dark Halo core, railgun damage, armor, and flight velocity. Now, for this particular one, I am 100% sold here personally that I would be going for railgun damage on this, because we're going to be using this as a way, you know, using its webs to hold our prey in position, and those medium weapons track, and then just blap with railgun damage. Again, I don't think flight velocity is going to be of much use here. Tracking speed, definitely. Very nice one to have here, railgun tracking speed, especially if you're going to go for something like medium snubs and just grab stuff there. You could go for warp drive speed increase in that as well, just to get you from A to B a little bit faster. I don't really fly a Vigilant, so it's not one I properly understand. Other people can give you better information than I could when it comes to the Vigilant. I personally, I don't like this ship. I know it's really, really good, it's just I can't get over its appearance. But I think the Dark Halo core here really does sell it. If you were worried about the Vigilant falling behind other cruisers at Tech 10, for example, this 100% cements it as one of the best faction cruisers in the entire game. Like, seriously, that is going to have some serious firepower behind it. Those web bonuses mean that you don't have to worry about, like, whatever, you know, anything else you're going to do. Just stack damage. Stack damage as far as I'm concerned on this one. Now, if the Serpentis Corporation messed up by making the Vigilant look a little bit too much like a shiny spaceman carrot, then the Vindicator definitely makes up for it, especially again with that Dark Halo core on it. Just that, to me, I like the split hull design of ships anyway, but once you put that on there, this just looks like one of the most badass ships in the entirety of New Eden. Like, genuinely, I see that coming my way. I am getting the heck out. Now again, we remember that the Vindicator has insane web bonuses. It can just grab anything and hold it in place. Normally in this case, I'd be talking very much about like tracking bonuses and wanting things like that, because even with large snubs, their tracking speed's still not great. I think you could probably get away with that. I think additional armor is not going to be a bad thing here. It makes you ridiculously hard to kill. Flight velocity, probably not going to worry about it too much. Railgun damage, I think, is still going to be king here. Inertia modifier could be quite nice, and it's nice to see that you get bonuses for that. Railgun tracking speed, I do genuinely think, even with those web bonuses, having railgun tracking speed is not going to be a bad thing at all. It's not much, but 10% is not bad either, just to make sure that you get those large railguns slapping into whatever the heck you're shooting at. A good bit of railgun range there is always quite nice, plus additional armor. For me, this is just, again, it is flat out better than the Will of Steel core. Even if you just go for the railgun damage, it's just hard. Like, they're 18% railgun damage compared to 16.8% railgun damage. Even if you're just looking at the railgun damage, the Dark Halo is just flat out better, and I do honestly think that armor is going to be better than armor repairer. Armor repair amount, things like that, I just don't see active tank all that much on a Vindicator, simply because you can just absolutely wreck anything that gets too close to you. To me, this is just, oh yeah, that's a terrifying nanocore on what is already a terrifying ship. To me, the Sansha's nation ships are where these nanocores get really quite terrifying. Let's have a look here. Again, the Succubus itself, the Dark Halo core, just turns our favourite spiky little laser bug into a living nightmare. Pun wholeheartedly intended for the battleship that we'll be talking about in just a moment. But again, the fact that this is now a nanocore to a ship that has previously not had one, I would argue that the Succubus is actually one of those ships that does pretty well compared to its Tech 10 Interceptor 2 variant, and the Executioner 2 Interceptor. I would actually undock a Succubus instead of an Executioner 2 Interceptor, personally, and that's probably the only one that I really actually would. Because it gets those nice shield field module bonuses and things like that. So again, the fact here that the Dark Halo core gets bonuses to either laser damage, to flight velocity, or to shield really makes a massive amount of difference here. Shield is actually pretty nice to have on this faction frigate because you have such insane resistances with that shield field module active. Flight velocity, though, just seems like the obvious one to go for here. It's easy just to suggest laser damage and just, burn straight through things, but think about it. The Succubus is already using an afterburner for some truly insane speeds, giving an additional 21% flight velocity on top of all its original afterburner bonuses means this thing is going to be whizzing around at speeds that are just frankly unbelievable, and I'm not sure it will actually hold its tracking. You're going to have to manually adjust your speed with that, but it does help if you need to get a getaway. Again, we've got things like warp speed, laser damage, afterburner speed increase. I really think is going to be one of the ones you're looking for here on the Succubus, just to roll, to increase that roll bonus even further. Like, that's just an insane amount of speed that this thing is going to be able to pull using an afterburner, so without sacrificing capacitor, without having to worry about getting scrammed. You're going to be running an afterburner that is basically faster than a micro warp drive at this rate. I would be going for those flight speeds there. Definitely look for laser tracking. It does exist on here, I did see it earlier. Laser tracking, I think, is going to be one that is going to be very useful. There it is, laser tracking speed, just because of how fast this ship can be going alongside its inertia modifier. I would personally be going for that flight velocity, then looking for inertia modifier and laser tracking speed to get the absolute most out of this badass looking nanocore. Now, if the Succubus does well with the Dark Halo nanocore, you can bet your biscuit the Phantasm is going to do just as well, if not better. And again, look at it. This is already an evil-looking ship with the sheer amount of spikes and just venom dripping off this thing. And now there it is in that sort of metallic slate grey black with that molten finish. This is just, it's so evil, I love it. Laser damage, shield, flight velocity, same thing going on again here. With the Phantasm now, though, that flight velocity, again, this is actually going to push it into, quite frankly, insane speeds for a cruiser. You'll be amazed at how fast this thing can actually go. That said, one of the common complaints with the Phantasm is that, yeah, it's great, I can speed tank most things, and, I've got good resists and that against other things that I can't speed tank, and thanks to the shield field module, etc., but I have low damage. This allows you to change that. You can just go straight for laser damage here, except that the Phantasm is already a pretty scary faction cruiser as it is, and just rack up that damage, yo. Just sit there and kill things faster. I know that sounds just like really obvious, and but to me that's one of the big things with the Phantasm. A lot of people love this ship, but just complain about its damage. You now have a nanocore that has a primary 18% increase to medium laser damage. We can then add on more laser damage via the secondary bonuses there. You can see 6.3%, etc. like there. We can make the shield bigger again if you're worried about actually getting hit and having that shield field module active for a bit longer. If you're one of those people who uses a Phantasm as an actual guardian ship, that's a good option. I'm not going to say that's not, but absolutely I would personally be just going straight for the laser damage here and turning what is already a very scary cruiser into one that can actually deal an insane amount of damage alongside its insane survivability. Finally then, we come full circle on that joke I made earlier about nightmares with the Sansha's Nation battleship, the Nightmare. Yes, that was the reference. It was really not that, not that special. Anyway, here we have the Nightmare Dark Halo core. If you thought Heartbreaker made this ship look insane, then the Nightmare, the Dark Halo core to me just pushes it up that little bit further in the badass scale of awesome. I'm beginning to sound a little bit like Mr. Torg now, the amount I'm saying badass, but hey, there we go. Let's have a look again at what I would consider with this. Laser damage, shield, flight velocity, it's going to very much be like the Phantasm. I think the Nightmare is already ridiculously tanky, and if you wanted to make sure it is the centre of your fleet as an indestructible guardian, then yeah, sure, go for additional shield. Pump up the shields even higher with this Nanocore. But for me, I genuinely think that the laser damage is where this is going to go. It's already a pretty low damage battleship, but pushing that damage up using the Nanocore special abilities 100% to me is going to be the way that we do things. Laser tracking speed, I don't think it really needs it all that much. Nice to have. Warp drive speed increase, no, not at all. Definitely afterburner speed increase would be the one you go for out of those two, but again, I don't really think it needs it. It's always struck me as weird that the Nightmare actually still gets that, just because, you know, it's still a battleship and you're still not really going to be moving all that much other than when you want to slingshot. So inertia modifier better than flight velocity on a battleship in my opinion, but there we go. For the Nightmare, it's already pretty much one of the tankiest ships in the entire game, one of the hardest to kill. I think upping the damage on it, again, just turns an already terrifying ship into a literal nightmare. There's the joke. The Blood Raider Covenant are already the boogeymen of children's nightmares in the Amarr Empire. They're literally the stories that are told by mothers to their children to make them behave. So when we add on a Dark Halo Nanocore to something like the Cruor, again, you're taking a literal nightmare to children and turning it into one of the scariest things ever. The Happy Boy now looks ridiculously sinister with that. Like, you know, I really like actually how it brings out the Blood Raider logo on the sides at the front there as well. They now actually look like teeny little beady shark eyes. It's gone from being sort of smiley and goofy to now being smiley and threatening, like some kind of evil, murderous clown. Anyway, again, being a faction frigate, this is the first time that we've seen a Nanocore for something like this, and I was a little surprised that we didn't see something like, rather than laser damage, getting additional E-War on here, something like, you know, the how the Blood Raiders already get Nosferatu or Neutralizer strength and things like that, although I'll admit I'm glad that it didn't, simply because it already gets really nice bonuses to those, and anything extra, personally, I think would be overkill on anything except the Cruor. The Cruor could probably do with extra Neutralizer, just to help it flatten cruisers and battleships and things like that a little bit faster, but in my opinion, when I've been flying the Cruor, one of the biggest problems is just its survivability. It's trying to keep it alive long enough for your opponent's capacitor to utterly give up. So armor seems like a really obvious way to go here, although flight velocity, again, considering how slow the Cruor is, if you want to be able to catch prey, going for flight velocity to keep the, keep up right next to them and keep the Nosferatu and Neutralizer right on them, definitely an option there. Now, I have kind of gone through all of the stuff down here at the bottom as well, just to make sure that there was no E-War bonus to things like, Nosferatus and Neutralizers. It doesn't exist. Warp Drive, definitely something that you might want to go for on this to help you catch and keep up with your targets a bit more. Flight velocity is very nice. Again, I don't think with the Cruor that things like laser damage, tracking speed, and that are all that important. It doesn't matter how quickly you kill someone with the Cruor, it's about turning them into a floating space brick as quickly as possible. You stop them from killing you, and then you just slowly snack on them, kind of like a wasp. You know, you immobilize your prey and then you just pick off the little bits piece at a time. Even if it takes you 10 minutes to kill something, at least they're not killing you, and you will get there eventually. That's kind of the point with Cruor. So I don't think damage and laser range and things like that are useful here. I think flight velocity to catch your prey and armor to stay alive are definitely the things that you're going to be looking at for here. I'm really quite excited for this one. I may have to scale back into small lasers and go flying my Cruor again just to try this one out. Now, I once referred to the Ashimmu as the demon princess of cruiser PvP, and that definitely hasn't changed even with the addition of other ships up at tech level 10, etc. This is still an absolutely terrifying ship, especially with that Dark Halo core in it. Like, genuinely, I think this is one of the coolest looking ships with that Dark Halo core, and that is saying something. This is a core that looks exceptional on every single ship that I've seen it fitted to, but just the Ashimmu really does come across as something else with it, and I wish I could zoom in and see a bit more of it. Looking at the stats, I think this is pretty much going to be similar to looking at the Cruor. I think flight velocity and armor are probably going to be your main options here. Laser damage are, not necessarily a bad option per se. I just think that armor and flight velocity are going to help you do a bit more with it. And when we come to the sort of cruiser side, the secondary stats, again, I think that you're going to be looking at survivability and flight velocity a bit more than you're going to be looking at application and damage, because the main purpose of this ship is to turn its opponent into floating space scrap, then to rip it apart from there. You literally switch off their capacitor, stop them escaping, stop them doing anything like fighting back, and then you rip them apart. So it doesn't matter how long it takes you to do so, the point is they're not ever getting away. Obviously doing it slightly faster can be advantageous, especially if you're thinking that there's, you know, reinforcements arriving, but the Ashimmu has pretty good DPS. Not for, you know, it's not as good as other ships of its class, but it's still pretty solid. It's not like the Cruor, you know, you're getting more than 300 DPS out of an Ashimmu is the point I'm trying to make here. Now, I will throw my hands up and admit that I was wrong about the Bhaalgorn. I thought that this was one of the most terrifying battleships in the entirety of EVE Echoes, and it is still a very scary ship. Unfortunately, I've just seen it outclassed by things like the Geddon, and of course the Apocalypse Striker. It's still an exceptional ship, it's just not quite at the level of terror that I thought it was at before. Now the question is this Nanocore going to change that? Well, it certainly changes its appearance. If you're not a fan of that mottled blood effect, then I'm sure you're a fan of looking like a demon that's just burst its way out of the heart of hell, which genuinely this ship really does. But I'm not sure that actually the rest of its stats here, even with the Nanocore, are quite enough to pull it up above some of the other cheaper options out there. I love the Bhaalgorn, I really, really do. Just, it's kind of, it doesn't have the EHP that other battleships have at the same level. It's got lower damage, and, you know, it just... The E-War and capacitor bonuses don't necessarily make up for that. So I think here, if I were to be flying a Bhaalgorn, I'm going to be looking mainly at the armor here and making my ship just that little bit more tanky, keeping it alive long enough to rip apart whatever I'm going up against. Admittedly, yeah, if you are going for a shield Bhaalgorn, which is absolutely a thing, then that stat does nothing for you, at which point laser damage is pretty much where you're going to be going. Anyone who puts flight velocity onto a battleship, I kind of have to wonder what you're doing. I'm not going to say you're wrong, because you probably have a plan that I'm just not aware of right now. I'm just not sure why you would put that on there. Inertia modifier, yeah, absolutely, so that you can realign and you can slingshot and things like that. Just actual flight velocity, I kind of feel like there are better stats out there you could be going for. Here on the Bhaalgorn, I 100% believe that the best stat you can be going for here is going to be armor. Anything related to armor, and just armor tank your Bhaalgorn, sorry. Just armor tank it, and make it as survivable and as tanky as possible using the Dark Halo core. It's still, in my opinion, not gonna quite pull it up to the level it should be, but at the same token, it's a darn sight closer, and it's gonna look amazing whilst you're doing it, and you've just got some very scary bonuses there. Absolutely. I love the Bhaalgorn, and I hope this really makes, you know, a big improvement here for it. Finally then, we come to the Angel Cartel, and I'm going to annoy everyone, least of all myself, by the fact that this is going to mess up my timestamp order in the description down below, and we're going to start with the battleships first, saving the best for last, in my opinion, sort of, or rather, the one I want to talk about the most, rather. Anyway, so the Machariel Dark Halo core. If you have a, you know, a ship that is already named after an angelic creature, and you're giving it a Dark Halo, I think there's something just really quite spiritually awesome about that as well. And just the Machariel is actually one of my favourite battleships for the faction ships. I think this thing can be ridiculously tanky, it can put out a lot of damage. I've been watching some folks in Catskull fly theirs recently, and I'm tempted. I am sorely tempted, but it's a battleship, and Benzie doesn't fly battleships, right? Anyway, as we look at the stats here, this is where I think this really shines. This core gives you a lot of choice. Now, normally, I've said before, flight velocity is not something I would ever really consider on a battleship. I think the Machariel is the one exception to that. This is already quite a fast battleship. Adding additional flight velocity could actually have some pretty good uses. That said, I'm a firm believer that either going full-on tank or full-on damage with the Machariel is the best way to do it, and so therefore going for the 18% cannon damage or the 22.5% shield just seems the better options. I'm slightly miffed that it is just shield. I know everyone sits there and looks at Angel Cartel and says, oh, they're shield tanks, because the game says so, but there is literally no good reason for that. If you look at their shield stats and their armor stats, they are literally identical, other than how the actual resistances are spread. Obviously, armor has better EM resist and lower explosive, whereas shield is the other way around. But if you are flying in, for example, laser space, tanking a Machariel with armor is a really good option, and it will stay alive like you would not believe. Obviously, if you're going up against explosive damage, then yeah, shield tank it. But for the 5 factions, the Angel Cartel actually work really well either as armor or shield, and I'm a little bit disappointed that it's 22.5% just to shield. You don't get the option of armor, but I guess people would call that unfair that we get 4 options on Angel Cartel, completely ignoring the fact that we live in the worst area of space anyway. And the developers have said they won't change the loot because we get twice as much of the trash loot as everyone else, or we have twice as many systems to get the trash loot from. Anyway, as we look at the other stats here, this again, everything here I personally think is really useful. Cannon damage, inertia modifier, cannon tracking, flight velocity, everything here works really well on a Machariel. You can kind of go with any stats and just then you could almost sit there and just you know upgrade your nanocore and then change your fit based on what your nanocore gives you almost. I'm not suggesting you do that. Please don't comment in the comment section, oh, it's a really stupid idea. I know it's a stupid idea. But the point is you almost could. I'm trying to say that every stat on this nanocore is actually useful for the Machariel. If you're going for like a warp drive speed increase, you can actually use that to get some really heavy speed out of this. Cannon damage and cannon tracking speed, obviously useful. Cannon range, obviously useful. Inertia modifier, useful. Everything out of this nanocore is useful to the Machariel, and that's just awesome. I would argue that the Cynabal is actually one of the most versatile faction cruisers in the entire game. You can use autocannons on this, you can get away with strike cannons, you can shield tank it, you can armor tank it, it's fast, it's got actually decent tank compared to some other ships, you know, other cruisers of a similar tier level, etc. But it does kind of look like a bit of a space cockroach. So now, instead of a space cockroach, it looks a bit like kind of a space leech or a space glowing slug roach thing. I don't know, I just... look at it! Look at it, it looks amazing. It genuinely looks amazing. Instead of it looking like a bug that you want to step on, it now looks like a gigantic bug that's about to step on you. Anyway, again, like the Machariel before it, I genuinely think that every single stat here on the Cynabal is useful. You might decide that actually you do wish to prop up its shield a little bit more. I say that it's fairly tanky, I'm including the speed tank aspect there. The actual shield side of things is pretty low on a Cynabal, so upping the shield there is a good way to make yourself that little bit more tanky if, like a certain someone I know, you want to be soloing as many Inquisitors, Scouts, and Dead Spaces as you can manage, and trying to do so in a Cynabal. So adding extra shield, yeah, it's extra survivability, that's awesome. Additional cannon damage, we already have a cruiser that is basically a Gatling gun, either with strikes or with autocannons, but especially with autocannons, so an additional 18% DPS pushes this up into the truly monstrous sort of range of damage. Flight velocity, again, this is already a ship that is pretty good at speed tanking ships of its size, so adding additional flight velocity 100% works. And just like the Machariel, I'm not going to go through it all again, pretty much every single one of these secondary attributes has a strong use here on the Cynabal, whether it's tank, whether it's speed, whether it's damage, whether it's application, whatever you want to go for, this Dark Halo Nanocore has you covered, and that's exciting. Now, of course I was going to save the Dramiel for last. This is one of my favourite ships in the game, or certainly I wish, you know, I love this ship more than any other ship in the game, despite the fact that it's not nearly as good as I think it ought to be. But, again, look at how the Dark Halo core makes this look. The Rose Thorn skin was a bit of a letdown for me. There wasn't really much going on with it on the Dramiel. Here, though, That just looks insane, and you can bet that I'm going to be picking this up as soon as I can. Anything to give me a reason to fly a Dramiel again, even if it's just how absolutely badass it looks, I will do it. But, fortunately, we do get some really nice stats here. Now, I'm not going to lie, the Dramiel to me is in a bit of a weird situation. I genuinely think the Slasher 2 Interceptor massively outclasses the Dramiel, but here I think the Dramiel might actually even pull ahead. That additional flight velocity is going to allow the Dramiel to do some truly terrifying speed tanking, and I'm all for that. I think the shield is probably the one that I'm going to ignore, just pretend that it's not there, because I don't see why I would make my small shields 22.5% bigger. I'm still going to be blapped if I get caught, but cannon damage. The cannon damage here is actually really interesting to me, because again, the Dramiel is basically a Gatling gun. It gets bonuses to both its damage, coming straight out of those cannons, plus the activation time of those autocannons, so you can cycle at quite frankly ludicrous speeds and pump out an insane amount of DPS. I actually also sometimes fly a Strike Dramiel, which I know is a bit of an unusual one, but we do get tracking speed bonuses, we do get accuracy fall off and optimal range boosts and things like that on the Dramiel, so it does actually work. The damage, unfortunately, has been a little bit low, and it can be difficult to finish off a target nice and quickly, or to break a target's tank fast enough. So I think that 18% damage there might actually just push that Strike Dramiel into the break tank section of damage. It might be just enough to mean that the Strike Dramiel can actually break through an opponent's tank and therefore safely rip it apart from distance. I'm very excited to try this, and I will be jumping into the Dramiel, grabbing this Dark Halo core and going absolutely insane with it as soon as I can. Now again, the secondary stats here and attributes are really nice. I think Angel Cartel actually benefit from this probably more than any other. I think that, you know, the other factions enjoy certain bonuses and are going to, you know, get uses out of some of them. And I do think, honestly, that the Angel Cartel ships are still going to be left behind. If you compare a fully tricked out Dramiel to a fully tricked out Daredevil, yeah, I'm pretty sure the Daredevil's still going to go ahead. The point I'm trying to get at, though, is, does this now make the Dramiel viable? And yes, I think it does. If we look at things like cannon range, that is going to really help in many situations. Cannon damage definitely is always really nice. Even warp speed. One of the nice things about the Dramiel is the fact that you can, you know, you warp 50% faster than anyone else, which does genuinely have its uses. In certain cases, you could be trying to take out an interceptor, for example, and they decide that actually no, they've had enough, they successfully disengage, and they will try to warp to safety. If you can warp to that same place as they are, you will land before they do, and that might be just enough time for you to lock onto your target and finish it off. I'm theory crafting here. Again, something like an interceptor, it's not quite so easy because of how quickly they align, but with other ships, for example, you can actually overtake them in warp and be there waiting for them when they come out the other end, which is pretty funny. Shield, again, I think is the only thing I would not go for here. Otherwise, flight velocity definitely helps the speed tank, cannon damage, cannon application, cannon range. These are all nice things to have. I am excited to try this, and if I can find something really awesome, of course, I will be making a Dramiel video very soon. Anyway, folks, that really does wrap things up here for this particular video on the Dark Halo Nanocores. I am super hype about these. I hope you are too. I know there's a lot of repetition in this video, but I've kind of designed that simply so that anyone who jumps to the section that they wanted to see gets the full part of it. I don't know, I'm really excited about this. I think this CONCORD Pass is going to be the one for me that I actually enjoy the most. It's been nice having Hurricane Nanocores for Silent Rose, but getting some Frigate Nanocores for my Faction Frigates is going to be pretty awesome. I'm just really sad that I just respect out of small lasers and small railguns. I might have to put that back and undock some different Faction Frigates. Anyway, thank you for watching right the way to the end of this one, folks. Please let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Which one are you hyped for the most? Really excited to hear what you guys think, which ships you're going to be flying, and which bonuses you're going to be aiming for on them. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!